Now I'm going to give you my opinions, and we're going to play some audio. I'm going to start with my thoughts on the debate to start. I was asked minutes after the debate on Don Lemon's show last night who I thought won. And I'm going to start by saying this, because while I'm very anti-Trump, I don't like J.D. Vance, and I'm very open and honest about that. I'm also honest about what happens on a debate stage. Example, I was very concerned with Joe Biden before that debate against Donald Trump. What happened? Well, Joe Biden, we all know what happened there, and I talked about it on the air the next day, and I called for weeks for him to step aside. We all know what happened in that debate. It wasn't that Donald Trump won, it's that Joe Biden lost it. And I was very open and honest about that. And then a few weeks ago, the Kamala Harris debate, I told you guys that Harris would wipe the floor clean with Trump. And listen, there are going to be MAGA people out there with no credibility. They're going to say Trump won the debate because Trump said he did. We all know what happened on that debate stage. Kamala Harris wiped the floor clean with Donald Trump. She's a former prosecutor. She's very intelligent. She did a great job. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think he won the debate last night. You could say that J.D. Vance was polished. That's fine. But there's many questions he dodged and he wouldn't answer. And I also thought Tim Walz missed a lot of opportunities. I believe he did look a little nervous. He didn't push back on multiple occasions when I felt like he needed to. He did okay. I'm not going to sit here and rag on Tim Walz. This wasn't a Joe Biden performance, right? I thought he did fine. He did okay. But I wanted him to do better than okay. And I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that Tim Walz won on that debate stage last night, because I don't believe he did. I also am not going to sit here and say J.D. Vance wiped the floor clean with Tim Walz. He did fine. Even though he lied, even though I disagree with almost everything he said, he refused to admit that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. His stance on gun control was an embarrassment. He refused to talk about Donald Trump calling climate change a hoax. And I would have pushed back hard, and I don't believe Tim Walz did that, and that's why I say it's a draw. So when I say somebody won or somebody lost, what I'm telling you is they lost voters or they won voters. This is about independents. This is about moderate Republicans. And yes, if you're a Democrat, you're going to say that Tim Walz won last night. Chances are, if you're a Republican, you're going to say that J.D. Vance won. I am neither. I don't think either candidate won yesterday. I don't think any candidate or either candidate won independents yesterday. I don't care what Frank Luntz says when he picks 10 alleged voters that are undecided. If you're undecided at this point, you're a moron. Okay, I'm sorry. If you're undecided, either three things are going to happen right now. Either you're voting for Donald Trump, either you're voting for Kamala Harris, or you're not going to vote at all. You're not undecided. I've had it with people that say they're undecided. Frank Luntz is a tool. So that's my personal opinion. Tim Walz is not a great debater. He showed that last night. J.D. Vance is a liar, and he spews nonsense, but he's a little bit, if you want to use the term smooth, I guess some people are using that. That's fine. That's my opinion on what took place on that debate stage last night. I don't think there was a clear winner. I don't believe that it's going to change anybody's minds. Vice presidential debates usually don't have any impact on the presidential election anyway, but I thought Tim Walz missed an opportunity. He missed a lot of opportunities last night, and I was yelling at the TV. I was frustrated. I was angry, just like I was frustrated when Joe Biden debated Donald Trump a few months ago. I was frustrated. I was angry. So this was a really important moment, though, in the debate, and I think it's important to discuss this because you talk about the threat to democracy. And yes, I'm one of those people that I do believe that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. And this was a nice moment for Tim Walz, where he spoke about Donald Trump's loss, obviously, in the 2020 election. And again, because J.D. Vance has no backbone and he's a coward, and he's only speaking to one person that's watching, and that's Donald Trump, listen to this exchange.
Ability to say he is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further.
Okay, so if see, this is what I'm talking about now. If I'm Tim Walz, I say, I'm happy to talk to you about censorship. That wasn't the question or the conversation. I never brought up problems. That wasn't the question. Whether you think there were problems or not in the election, that's not the question. I'm going to ask it to you again. The question is, who won the 2020 election free and fair? And again, Tim Walz didn't push back. But that was a very important part of the debate because, again, it shows you what a coward J.D. Vance is, and I would have said it to his face. J.D. Vance is a coward. He won't answer the basic question of who won the 2020 election. If you're a Republican, if you're a MAGA Republican, you probably love that response because he wouldn't answer the question. If you're a Democrat, you're probably upset and angry at the response. Or if you're somebody like me, you're upset that, again, Tim Walz didn't push him on that. What I would have said is, this is the guy who's one heartbeat away, if they win in November, of being the leader of the free world, and he's not willing to admit that Donald Trump lost a free and fair election. There is no evidence of widespread voter fraud that could have changed the outcome of this free and fair election. And the reason why J.D. Vance stands here and refuses to answer the question, because he knows there's a listener of one. He's speaking to Donald Trump. That's exactly what I would have said. Do you want the second in command in this country to only kiss up to one person and not put America first and not put our democracy first? Because that's what J.D. Vance is doing on a debate stage right now. That's exactly what I would have said. This is all ad lib for me. Now, I could have wrote some stuff down and maybe been more eloquent in my answer, but Tim Walz didn't do any of that. And I was very disappointed. This is another point in the debate where you're talking about gun control. Again, gun violence is at all-time highs in this country. We're having school shootings left and right. It's an abomination. It's terrible. It doesn't matter whether there's gun violence in Chicago or Nevada, wherever it is, but they're specifically talking about school shootings, right? Innocent kids being gunned down and massacred in their schools. And have a listen to J.D. Vance's response, or lack thereof. It's idiocy when it comes to gun control and school shootings.
It's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully.
I made a mistake there. That's my bad. Before we get to the gun control stuff, I want to play you a commercial that Kamala Harris and the campaign put out in regard, before we get to the gun control stuff, in regards to Donald Trump losing the 2020 election and the fact that J.D. Vance won't answer. Have a listen to this.
It's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power.
He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future.
That is a damning non-answer. America, I think you've got a really clear choice of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
I think that's a really good campaign ad. And I think they should keep running it over and over and over again. J.D. Vance wouldn't answer the basic of questions like so many of these MAGA right-wing cowards. I've had some of them in studio that won't answer a direct question when I ask them who won the 2020 election. All right, now we'll go to the gun control cut. Again, this is the part where Vance is talking about school shootings. This is the part where Vance is asked, how do we deter some of these school shooters? And listen to J.D. Vance's response.
But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
He spoke about we need stronger windows and we need stronger doors in the schools, as if somebody like Uvalde, Texas, who just shot his grandmother in the face, will stop because a door is locked. Let me tell you something. AR-15s and some of these weapons that are being used in these mass shootings, they can pretty much shoot down a door and a window. So J.D. Vance, again, very weak on gun control, like so many Republicans are in 2024. So I thought that was a W for Tim Walz. But again, he wasn't aggressive enough in going after J.D. Vance. And again, Vance dodged a lot of questions yesterday, including climate change. Donald Trump once called climate change a hoax. Have a listen to J.D. Vance dodging the question.
And more of. But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that. And an all above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Yeah, that's actually very, very true. And again, Vance dodged the question when he was asked. He brought up immigration. He was asked right after that, talking about immigration, and he literally interrupted and didn't answer the question about climate change, and then started about the border, calling, again, talking points. Kamala Harris, the borders are, which she was not. So, again, there's many more cuts that I can play for you. And the bottom line is this. I don't believe there was a clear winner. The reason why I say that is I don't think it's going to change anybody's minds. I do think the Kamala Harris debate with Donald Trump did change some minds when it came to people that aren't voting for Trump but might be on the fence on whether they can support Harris or not. I thought Kamala did a great job, and she wiped the floor clean with Donald Trump. J.D. Vance didn't do that. He dodged a lot of questions. It's just the way he spoke, he was more polished. But that doesn't mean he won the debate, because there wasn't any substance there. Just calling her the borders are the entire debate and blaming her for inflation, which is absurd. Again, over and over and over again, the same right-wing talking points. Doesn't mean he won the debate. He just was more polished, and Tim Walz was not, for lack of a better term, as good of a debater and seemed nervous. That's why I don't say there was a clear winner here. But here's a really funny moment and a pathetic moment. Biff, also known as Donald Trump Jr., was questioned right after the debate from Caitlin Collins, who I think does a pretty darn good job. So Caitlin Collins goes up to Don Jr., and Don Jr. is the guy that brings up the word Hitler. Have a listen to how this went down.
Environment wasn't just created by Donald Trump.
Okay, but can I say, you can't blame, and everyone wants your dad to be safe. No one wants the threats against his life to happen, but you can't blame the media for those threats. There's been no evidence that's what drove those.
And allows people to have a platform to call someone literally Hitler every day for 9 years, it creates it. Okay. Whether you want to believe it or not, that's a fact.
But as you know, J.D. Vance once likened your dad to Hitler as well. He questioned if he was America's Hitler. But I want to talk about the debate.
Yeah. Good job, Caitlin. Yeah, so Don Jr. is blaming the left for calling Donald Trump Hitler, but yet his vice presidential nominee said Donald Trump is the next American Adolf Hitler. I mean, you cannot make this stuff up, the stupidity of Biff, also known as Donald Trump Jr. This is idiocy at its finest, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely absurd and ridiculous. It's absurd. And while all this stuff is going on the debate stage last night, I'm surprised they didn't bring this up. I'm surprised that Tim Walz didn't push hard on Donald Trump doubling down again in response to the injured U.S. troops in Iran in 2020, when Trump suggested they weren't really hurt because they had a headache. And we know many of these brave soldiers had traumatic brain injury, and they've talked about that. And again, Donald Trump doubled down on this yesterday. Have a listen to what he said about these troops and allegedly having just a headache, which we know is not true. They had traumatic brain injury.
Do you think Israel should retaliate to these missile attacks from Iran? But also, do you believe that you should have been tougher on Iran after they had launched ballistic missiles in 2020 on U.S. forces in Iraq, leaving more than 100 U.S. soldiers injured?
So, first of all, injured. What does injured mean? Injured means you mean because they had a headache, because the bombs never hit the fort. So just so you understand, there was nobody ever tougher in Iraq. They had no money with me. They would have made any deal with me. I would have had a deal made within 1 week after the election. They were dying to make a deal. And when you say not tough, they had no money. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money for Hezbollah. And when we hit them, they hit us. And they called us. And they said, we're going to shoot at your fort, but we're not going to hit it. And if you were a truthful reporter, which you're not, you would tell the following: none of those very accurate missiles hit our fort. They all hit outside. And there was nobody hurt other than the sound. It was loud. And some people said that hurt, and I accept that.
No, some people didn't say they were hurt. The untruthful person is you SOB. Many troops have suffered from traumatic brain injury. Some of those troops have talked about it on the record. I know a thing or two about traumatic brain injury when my family was in a very serious car accident when I was 12 years old. Members of my family have traumatic brain injury. It's not a headache, you stupid imbecile. And should we be surprised that Donald Trump, once again, is diminishing, lying, and insulting our brave men and women in uniform? If he's not calling them suckers and losers, if he's not saying he doesn't respect somebody because they were captured, now he's discrediting them and trying to say that, well, they just had a headache. No, they didn't just have a headache. I have a headache when I listen to the orange turd speak. That doesn't mean I have traumatic brain injury. And this guy is such an imbecile. He doesn't even know what traumatic brain injury is. Let me tell you something. TBI is something that many people in this country and throughout the world have to live with for their entire life, and it usually never goes away. It's damage to your brain that sticks with you, sadly, for your entire life. And the fact that this man will call it a headache, or say, basically diminishing it to just take some Tylenol and you'll be just fine, is so disrespectful. It's so disgusting. And the fact that Tim Walz served for 24 years didn't really hammer this home yesterday is also very disappointing. Donald Trump doubling down again on his stupidity. He is a disgrace. And again, diminishing and insulting our brave men and women in uniform. He seems to try to diminish and insult anybody that is brave. He seems to try to diminish and insult anybody that is more intelligent than him, that is more respected than him, which is a very low bar when it comes to Donald Trump. I say one more time, there were over 100 troops that were seriously injured. Many of them received traumatic brain injury from that missile strike. Donald Trump is a liar, and the fact that he continues to say this again in 2024 is mesmerizing to me, but we shouldn't be surprised. He still says he won the 2020 election, and he also says he won that debate with Kamala Harris on a debate stage. He's full of crap. Everything he says is a lie. I don't care how smooth you think J.D. Vance is. You want that idiot to run this country again? You want that idiot, that liable sexual abusing rapist, that 34-count felon. You want that man, and I use that term man loosely, you want that man to be the leader of the free world?